Have you ever thought, is this just me when struggling to stay organized, start tasks, or manage time? For those of us over 50, these challenges might not be just aging. They could be ADHD hiding in plain sight for decades. I'm Jami Shapiro, host of Grandma Has ADHD, and I'm building a community where your experiences matter. Whether you're diagnosed, questioning, or simply curious, you're not alone. Our Facebook group is filled with vibrant, understanding people over 50 who share their stories, strategies, and yes, even their struggles, with plenty of laughter along the way. Ready to find your people? Join our growing Grandma Has ADHD Facebook community. Please like and subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen and share it with someone who might need to hear they're not alone, because ADHD doesn't have an age limit and neither does understanding yourself better. Together, we're changing the conversation about ADHD after 50. Come be part of the story. Hi, and welcome to the latest edition of Grandma Has ADHD. We have a special guest this evening or today because I happen to be recording in the evening. I don't know when you're going to be listening to it, but Lisa is someone that I connected with on one of the many ADHD Facebook groups. And I've been pretty open about looking for people who are late life diagnoses and are open to sharing, because if you've been listening to my podcast, you know that one of my missions is to destigmatize ADHD, which tends to be a bigger problem with our boomers and our silent generation, although we are also addressing it with Gen X, but we seem to be a little less concerned about the stigma of ADHD. But let me introduce Lisa to you and then let her give you a little more information. So she is a 67-year-old woman diagnosed almost 10 years ago after her daughter, which is actually a very common, that's how my experience went. And she said that her diagnosis and medication have been transformative. Currently, she is an admin at a teen, young adult. I don't know what an IOP program is. So you're going to get to
Okay.
Go ahead.
Intensive outpatient program. So it's part of a day rather than inpatient or a full day.
Oh, okay. So that's going to be a good conversation to have. And she says she has a jar of fidgets on her desk. I love it. She says that I feel that one thing I offer is an example of a slightly weird adult. So I'm going to say this, Lisa. I think most of us with ADHD would describe ourselves as that slightly weird adult. And she says her current hyper focus, I love this, is Dungeons and Dragons and other role playing games. She says that she plays in person, but mostly online. And she is both a player and a game master, which some of you will know Dungeons and Dragons from the 80s. And I know that it has made a resurgence, or maybe it's continued, but I happen to have a child that also played D&D. And she said she is almost always the oldest person at the table. Enough oversharing yet? So if you have ADHD, you can completely relate to that question. But it was really interesting because I always ask our guests for their bios before they come on. And so before Lisa and I were able to connect, she said, I have a really long bio. And then she starts listing all of the things that she's done. And I'm like, that reads like an ADHD bio. So Lisa, tell us a little bit about your bio.
Okay. Well, I have a master's degree in marine biology. And actually, when I was there, I was doing my thesis on something different from everybody else in the lab, which is my normal state. Since then, I've been editorial assistant, technical writer, worked in document control. I was an HVAC and propane dispatcher. I was a database admin. I was a QA person for an Amazon account. Now I'm an admin secretary. And in the meantime, I was also a Girl Scout leader, trainer, or learning facilitator, like they call it now. Their service unit manager, which is like the area volunteer, and for most of the time, a single mom.
Wow, that's quite a hefty resume. And as I said, it just definitely rings of ADHD, because I don't know about you, Lisa, but I start to do something, I lose interest, and then I want to do something else. Is that you?
Yeah, pretty much. And a number of the jobs that I got, I applied to. I was like, oh, that looks kind of interesting. And I would apply for it. My career path is not a path. As I said, my training is in marine biology. And it has been anything but since then, but it's been a good life.
Nice.
So,
Okay, so what was it about my post that you said, hey, I'd like to be on the Grandma Has ADHD podcast?
well, it was a post about late diagnoses, and I am rather passionate about that because of the impact that this has had on my life. So I shared part of my story there. And you actually reached out to me and it's like, hey, why not?
Hmm, love it.
And as I said, one of my things that I want to do is normalize being open about ADHD. I am very open about it in just about any circumstance.
If I'm doing the math correctly, you were about 57 when you were diagnosed. Is that correct?
Right around there. It's
Okay.
a little bit fuzzy because I was unemployed at the time, was the Great Recession, and my younger daughter was struggling in high school, and they're like, "She's smart. Why is this much harder than her sister?" And I start looking online, and I find out about ADHD type in a 10, and it goes like, "That resembles my daughter, and it also resembles her mother." So
Mm,
I got her diagnosed and treated as soon as I could. For me, I was not going to pursue it because, hey, I've made it this long. What difference can it make?
I love that you just said that. Okay. So please share that.
My sister, who is a psychologist, sent me a bunch of books on ADHD, and I read one by Ned Hollowell called Driven to Distraction.
Yep.
I realized that every single challenge and difficulty I had in my life tied to ADHD. It
Yep.
wasn't just like forgetting things, just every financial, relationship, household wise. It wasn't just a bunch of little weird things, it all tied together.
Exactly. As I said, like it's almost prescriptive now. And by the way, I always say this, if you meet one person with ADHD, you meet one person with ADHD because we all have
Yes.
our little quirks. We're all really different, just like we have our own fingerprints.
Oh,
There are
yes.
definitely strings of commonality that run through it. But I love the fact that you said gone this far. So tell me what's been different since you've known you had ADHD?
Um, less shame, more permission to be myself. If the camera was on, you might notice here at home I have one of those ball chairs, and I occasionally absent-mindedly bounce up and down on it while I am talking or gaming or whatever. And it used to embarrass me, but now they just look okay. Okay.
And I
It
do want to say, by the way, to anybody that is listening and is just seeing beautiful me on YouTube, Lisa was open to being on camera. Some people a little shy about it, but we could not figure out how to work the camera. So that is why Lisa looks like just a black screen. But, Lisa, I don't know if you've ever heard this, but a lot of people with ADHD struggle with technology. Do you know that?
actually not because I love technology,
Okay.
and the people I know struggle with technology and have ADHD are also just that's not their jam. They're into soft sciences and things like that. I love technology, but I
Right.
also came from my dad was a mathematician and worked with some of the earliest computers on the space program. So I
Mm-hmm.
grew up around with pictures of rocket ships, of the shuttles and things like that around my house.
Right. Well, the
So
reason that I bring that up to you is that what I have noticed about a lot of us with ADHD is that we don't like to be bored. And for a lot of us, reading instruction manuals is boring. So we get a computer, we get an iPhone, we get a device, and we just plug it in and go. And then we can't figure out why it doesn't work.
well, I don't read the whole manual, but I will look in the index and look at the particular thing or do a search on that particular item.
Well, good for you. Again, you meet one person with
Mhm.
ADHD. So I love that you said it. I have more permission to be myself. I will agree with that. In fact, I think that's going to be an amazing title for this conversation because that is exactly what it is. Do you remember the sayings like when I'm an old lady, I will purple? And do you remember those signs that were
Yes,
everywhere?
I have a purple forelock in my hair.
There you go.
And what you cannot see because I'm not on camera is that I have an array of fidgets around me. I can focus better on the conversation
Mhm.
when my hands are busy and when I am playing Dungeons and Dragons in person or other games. I play a whole ton of other role playing games. I
Mhm.
will just show it to the game master and say, I will focus better if I have my hands busy. You
Right.
will be able to see that it doesn't distract me from what I'm doing.
Did you ever keep any of your old notebooks? Because I noticed that I was constantly doodling, and I've noticed that's common for a lot of people. Before we knew we had ADHD, we would be listening in class, but doodling the whole time.
I drew mazes.
There you go. I did those too. And I also did like floor plans and all sorts of things. So, yeah. See what I mean? Like you talk to somebody and you're like, oh, yeah, I did that. I did that.
Mhm, mhm.
Um, When I was at a conference recently, I handed out fidget toys with Grandma Has ADHD stickers because
Oh,
I figured
nice.
that anybody that was going to take one of those probably would appreciate having a fidget toy. Okay,
And
go ahead.
when I lead a game, when I run a game, I have a little jar of fidgets that I put out in the middle, and I said, if you want to play with these, go ahead.
Yeah, I love it. So, how would you say your life changed from the time that you knew you had ADHD, or maybe looking back, how do you see ADHD showing up in your life before it was diagnosed?
I knew I was different before I was 10 years old. I knew that somehow things were not the same for me as for the other kids in my class. And I
Mm-hmm.
basically defined it as weird.
Mm-hmm.
I just knew that somehow I was different, that I understood things differently, that I saw things differently. I didn't understand things the same way that people did.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was growing up and going to school in the 1960s. People say, I don't want my kid to get a diagnosis. I don't
Mm-hmm.
want them to be labeled. Well,
Mm-hmm.
I was labeled underachiever, lazy, space
Mm-hmm.
cadet. Um,
Mm-hmm.
if she only lived up to her potential, and
I
all
hear
of those things. And I'm going like ADHD is a much better label than that.
been lazy 100%. And not
Mhm.
only that, but again, that's what I'm trying to do here is say, hey, we're not stupid, we're not lazy, there's nothing wrong with us. Our brains are wired differently. We
They
think,
are.
yeah. And I recognize like my brain is speeding through life. I
Mhm.
even noticed this with my older child who was diagnosed, and that's how I realized that I had it. They stutter because they can't keep up, and not that they have any speech impediment, not at all, but the brain and the mouth don't coincide. And so sometimes you got to slow it down because I can't understand you.
Sometimes when I'm talking, I will stop and say, brain, mouth, out of sync. Give me a second. And I will
Hmm.
just sort of like take a deep breath and go from there. But going back to being weird, one of the gifts in my family is my mom basically went like, okay, yeah, we're all weird. And
Hmm.
I had a certain level of acceptance. I got all those negative messages from the world, and just because of culture, some from home, but I didn't get that just awful level from home. And so, speaking of home, you ask about family.
Hmm.
My mother, if she had been alive, would be 102 now. My mother
Wow.
had ADHD. She was 35 when I was born. My mother had ADHD. Three of her four children had ADHD, and at least two of her four grandchildren have ADHD.
So when did you realize that your mom had ADHD?
I didn't know that she was undergoing that diagnosis at about the same time that I was.
Wow.
She was somewhat ahead of the curve than
Hmm.
I, but she didn't talk about it until
Heard
much
that.
later.
I've heard this in other interviews where they were both getting diagnoses at the same time, but the older adult parent did not disclose. And again, back to the stigma of ADHD. And yes, it's highly, highly heritable. And back to what you said, I have always described me and my kids that when I would describe ice cream, and I was trying to explain it, and this was before I think I knew that we had ADHD. I'm not sure, or maybe before I was really learning about it. But I said, some people like vanilla ice cream. And my kids said, yes. We're more like fish food, like the Ben and Jerry's fish food. We're just
Mhm.
not vanilla. And I enjoy that spicy, flavorful life, but it is not for everybody. And it does run in families. And so we tend to have just the families of, I hate to use the word weird because it's not a great word, but it also is a great word, right?
Well, I sort of owned the word weird. It's like
Mhm.
I would respond like, "You say weird like it's a bad word?" and things like that. So I basically owned the word. So what? I'm weird.
Mhm.
That's the way I am.
Yeah. Seen any of Penn Holderness's videos, by the
Oh, yeah.
way?
Oh, yes.
Okay, I love it. So he has 2 videos. If you have not watched them, you have got to listen. I'm trying to get him on the podcast, by the way. But he has one called You Might Have ADHD. And there's another one that he does ADHD as a parody to Under the Sea. His brilliance, you're like, I want what he's having. And he said he was the keynote speaker at the ADHD conference, the International ADHD conference. And he said, I choose not to be medicated because I don't want to lose that creativity. And I never pass judgment on medication. Everybody has to make the choice that's right for them. But when I do this podcast, I really highlight the non-medication route, because there are so many seniors or people 50 and over who have other health conditions, and medication is not an option for them because they're going to mix with other medications. So I always talk about the skills over the pills, not to say anything
Mhm.
about pills. I'm just not a doctor and I just don't explore that topic. So I am going to take a break, but I want to find out how you're coping, how you're hacking ADHD. And then we also discussed that you would like some coaching around an upcoming move, which happens to be my specialty. So we're going to take a pause. We're going to listen to a word from Silver Linings Transitions or our sponsor. And then we are going to come back with Lisa. Are you tired of feeling like you can't get it together? Struggling with clutter that overwhelms you despite your best efforts? Wondering why organization feels impossible while others make it look so easy? You're not alone, and it's not your fault. Hi, I'm Jami Shapiro, host of the Grandma Has ADHD podcast, and I understand exactly what you're going through. I combine my years of hands-on work as founder of Silver Linings Transitions, a move management and home organizing company, together with ADHD coach training, and help adults 50 and over connect the dots between ADHD and lifelong struggles. Whether you're downsizing, decluttering, or simply trying to create systems that work for your ADHD brain, I provide virtual and in-person coaching for those in the San Diego area. Together, we'll develop practical strategies that honor how your brain actually works, not how you think it should work. Ready to trade shame for understanding? Visit grandmahasadhd.com or call to schedule a discovery session at 760-607-7377, because it's never too late to finally make sense of your story. Ever wondered why helping a loved one declutter feels like speaking different languages? I did, especially with my mom. It wasn't until I founded Silver Linings Transitions, helping San Diego seniors organize and move for over a decade, that I discovered why. We all experience clutter differently, and for those of us with ADHD, it's a whole other world. If you are listening in the San Diego area and feeling stuck with moving, paperwork, photos, or home organization, our team at Silver Linings Transitions gets it. We understand ADHD's unique challenges, and we won't just help you get organized. We'll create sustainable systems that finally stick. Schedule a consultation with our team today at 760-522-1624. That's 760-522-1624, or find us at silverliningstransitions.com. So we are back with Lisa. And when I take a break, I always sort of ask the guest how they feel the podcast is going or the interview is going, and if there's anything they want to share that I haven't mentioned. And Lisa brought up some really good things. And I love, Lisa, that you are an open book and willing to help other people. I think that is really one of the things that I am finding such a benefit from this podcast is people are saying, thank you for sharing this story, because then it allows me to feel more comfortable sharing mine and getting the help that I need. So you share some of the challenges that you've had, you think, as a result of your ADHD.
So I was mentioning my marriage and my divorce, which actually was a failure was not due to ADHD. What was the issue was I stayed in too long, but probably because of my ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right. Because we tend to be pleasers, right?
we tend to be pleasers, but we also tend to lack confidence.
Yeah.
And what my ex-husband did was gaslight me a whole bunch. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
you didn't say that. You are taking me out of context. No, I never said that. And all these things to deny what he had said and said to me. And
Well,
I'm
that
used to being told that I'm wrong all the time. So I accepted that. So I stayed way too long.
Well, I would also say that, and I don't know if this was true for you, but I will admit that I will forget. I have forgotten
Yes.
conversations. It's embarrassing. I was at a networking event tonight and there's someone who I have seen and spoken to, and I'm looking at her like, I have no idea who you are. I've noticed with age, I'm 55, that my ADHD is absolutely getting significantly worse. And that's another reason that I want to be doing this podcast, because we're going to really, really need those skills. Anybody who ages is going to have just normal cognitive impairment. That had nothing to do with ADHD, just our brains, not that we can't do the same thing. It just takes us longer to process. So then you throw in a little bit of ADHD and we're definitely going to need more skills.
I
Go
have
ahead.
said all my life that my brain is like a sieve. It holds
Mhm.
some things and other things just flow through.
Yep.
Like for this podcast, I put it on my calendar. I put a reminder a week in advance. I put a
Hmm.
reminder 3 days in advance. I put a reminder the day before, a reminder the hour before, and a reminder the 10 minutes before. And so,
Wow, you were committed. Thank you, Lisa.
and that's what I do for my doctor's appointment. I don't take appointment cards. I stand there right there and I put
Me
in all
too.
the reminders. All the games I play are on my calendar with
Yep.
reminders.
That's what I've been telling people, actually. That's been a really good hack for me, is that as soon as I commit to something, it has to go into my calendar. No more, I
Yes.
will remember. Yep. Even I'm boiling eggs, you can see the watch. So if people are listening, I'm wearing an iWatch, which I swore up and down I would not get because I was worried that it was going to be a distraction, but it has become my memory. And
Mhm.
so I set alarms for everything. Yeah. Okay. So some people who are listening to this are just discovering they have ADHD. And again, majority of us are late life diagnosis. And
Mhm.
as you can imagine, and I'm sure you went through this, there's grief, like, oh my
Oh,
gosh,
yeah.
right? And then there's also a relief. To your point, I get to be myself. What would you say to somebody who is listening to this podcast and experiencing, maybe they don't want to get, and I'm not also saying that you even have to be formally diagnosed, but I always say, like, if it quacks like a duck and it walks like a duck,
Mhm.
and you've got family members with ADHD, it might be ADHD.
Mhm.
So what would you say to the people that are listening?
Do things that are right for your brain, even if it's not necessarily what other people do. Um,
Okay.
when I have a project, I usually have two deadlines. I have the aspirational deadline where I would like to get it done,
Uh-huh.
and I have the deadline where I must get it done.
Hmm.
And I very rarely hit the aspirational deadline,
I was going to just ask you, like, how often does that happen?
but I means that I hit the actual drop dead deadline much more consistently.
Sure. The dopamine, and it's
Mhm.
got to get done by this certain time, right?
Yeah, and I was telling somebody that, and she looked at me and she said, "Why don't you just have one deadline?" And I looked
I
back at her and said, "This works for my brain."
was going to say, you don't have ADHD, clearly. You wouldn't be
And
asking that question.
and so do what works for your brain. Even I think that one of the tragedies of my mom's life is that she kept on trying to do things the normal way and kept
Mm,
on failing at it. And
mm,
the impact that it had on her, but she had many wonderful things like my brother said if my mom heard about a food, she tried to cook it. And so
mhm.
we ate so many different kinds of food. We made lasagna from scratch.
You even made the noodles?
We did not make the noodles, but we had to go to the Italian grocery store because they
Nice.
did not carry lasagna noodles in the regular store.
Okay, so can I give you a squirrel moment?
Sure.
So I learned, again, one of the things that I've learned through ADHD coaching is that sometimes people with ADHD, they're very picky about the foods that they will eat. I am one of those people. Was that the case for your family?
I'm thinking about that. And one of the things that I have sort of learned is that I have modified my life to not have to deal with things that are difficult
Like
so that,
husbands.
well, you saw a glimpse of me. I'm wearing a headset rather than earbuds. I loathe earbuds. I hate the feeling of them in my ear. I
Mhm,
think that my mom basically figured out we had a lot of certain dishes, and I think she picked a lot of the dishes because this is what the people would eat. Or
mhm,
that thing that my mom did that I've picked up is if there's somebody who doesn't like the main dish, make sure that there's a good solid side dish that they can eat.
mhm.
So
I don't think that's an ADHD thing. I think that's just a mom hack.
I don't remember like big battles over pickiness, but I also think that my mom sort of managed it fairly well.
Mhm.
So
Okay. So any other advice that you would wanna give somebody who's listening, or any hacks that you know, "Hey, you need to hear this one," I know we just talked about getting the alarms and then having the aspirational date versus the drop dead date. What are anything else? And then I want to go into your issue.
Yeah, do not believe that you will remember things, write things down.
Absolutely. Or put them
I
in
actually
digital technology.
with all the jobs that I went through, I did a lot of contract jobs, and you jump in, they want you to start doing it immediately, so I would start writing down the instructions as they were given to me and then type them up. And at the contract jobs, when I was done with it, I would give my boss my typed up notes. And there were a couple of times that even though it was a contract job that was supposed to end like that week, their boss said, hold on to her for another week to make sure that is all completed because we want this.
Mhm.
Because I would do detail. And when I went out for knee surgery, I had like a 23-page document called How To.
Oh, wow.
And because some
Impressive.
of my jobs I only do quarterly, and I don't believe that I will remember it in 3 months.
Sure. Okay. Well, your strengths and you play to them. Okay. So I asked you if you had some issue that you might want to get some coaching around, Lisa, and you shared with me that you have a move coming up.
It doesn't have a deadline. It is time for me to move. I have lived in this house for over 25 years, and it's
Okay.
my house. I paid for it, and then I bought my ex-husband's share out during the divorce and held
Hmm.
on through the Great Recession and fires. But it takes a lot of energy,
Hmm.
and I drive 45 minutes home to drive
Hmm.
home. I am
Hmm.
driving from one valley over a mountain ridge into another valley as my normal commute.
Mm,
And also, basically, my family is elsewhere.
mm,
So my original plan was to move close to my family in Southern California. But at
mhm,
this point, after the fires in January, where my hometown burned down, housing is so dear in there, I don't know if I'd be able to find a decent space to live. But even
that
just moving closer to work
mhm,
and selling my house before it burns down or the insurance goes up yet again. So
mhm.
it's time, but I do not have a deadline for it.
I think uncertainty is hard, right, for anybody. And so not knowing where you're going, have you started exploring? Have you started at what feels good for you?
I have been looking at it, but I get into brain freeze.
Well, sure,
Um,
because decision paralysis is very
there are
common.
people are saying you could rent a room in a house, and
Mhm,
I don't want to go from owning my own house to being a renter, just being in one room. Back in college, we rented rooms in houses where basically the owners pretty much made us feel unwelcome in any other area besides our room.
mhm.
And and so that's when people say rent a room, I get an association with that.
But let's go back to the move because that is definitely something that I think a lot of people who are in the situation that you're in, where they know they want to move, they just don't know how to get there. I think that is where I'd like to take this conversation back for our
Mhm.
audience. But then I said, I'm happy to revisit the rest of it with you.
Okay.
Um, so, are you aware, and I also want the audience to hear this, that there is an industry, and I'm actually a part of it, called the National Association of Senior and Specialty Move Managers?
I did not, of course, have heard your announcements about your business, but did not know that it a full-fledged business. I was listening going like, why can't you be up in Central and Northern California?
Okay, so I am part of a national organization, and what we do, and every business sort of runs differently, but we're all part of the same organization. So we have insurance and ethics and all of the training and things that we all have to do. We all run it differently, but there are people who will do free consultations and they will break the move down for you and help guide you through the process.
I would definitely I have wanted some kind of professional assistance in this. I have been getting rid of stuff for decades because one of the things when you are a single mother and don't have a bunch of money is you save things in case you need them. And I have
Mhm.
been divesting myself of that for quite a while. And actually, one of my nieces is coming up next week and is going to help me get rid of more stuff.
Oh, that's
So,
amazing. Well, I have to
yes,
tell you, that's not just a single mom thing. That's very, very common for a lot of our clients. And I think even more so for people who do have ADHD, because we tend to have a sense of justice and we want to make sure that things aren't just going to go into the landfills.
tell you one thing that has helped me is that I am very much into free upcycling and recycling and things like that. So I am a moderator for two kinds of groups. One is free cycle and one is buy nothing.
I love
And
them. Both are
and
great.
They are wonderful. And one of the things I ask myself is, how often do I see this come up on Free Cycle or Buy Nothing? And I'll look at this as like, I see something like this come up like every couple of weeks. So if I get rid of it, I could probably get another one in a week or two.
That is such a good tip, Lisa. I'm so glad you shared. There's also OfferUp, and also
Okay.
Craigslist Curb Alert, where if you wanted to post something, you could post it for someone else. And then if you needed it, you could also possibly get it. So I want to give those a
Okay.
plug. That is impressive. So the other thing that you can do, you can hire a professional, but say you aren't ready to hire a professional, right? What
Hmm.
would you think that you could do to just get some momentum?
Body doubling helps me.
Oh,
I I joke about it, but it's true, is that somebody is helping me clean and they'll pick up something and they'll hold it up and they'll say, "Where do you want me to put it?" And I will look at it and it's like, I don't actually really need that. And it may have been sitting on my table for 6 months, but when they
right.
hold it up and ask me, it puts it in a
Sure.
whole new light. And I can say, oh, yeah, I can get rid of that.
So I actually want to give a little bit more definition of what body doubling is for
Sure.
people. So yours really actually isn't body doubling. You've got company there. Body doubling is when you have somebody who's simultaneously working on a project for themselves while you are working. There are all sorts of online platforms that are for people like us. You can just Google body doubling
Oh,
and
yeah.
you set times and then you say, hey, this is what my goal is for this time. And then while you're doing it with someone, my mom actually recognized that she did a lot better when she had company, even just a companion to be there with you, just to
That
keep you going.
you were absolutely correct. I was kind of blending, and I have also done that too. I was just kind of like spreading the word out to more meetings than it really had.
Right. So I've shared with you that there's a company that does what we do, but what I like to tell my clients, and I'm learning to merge the world that I've been in with, which is the downsizing, organizing specialist that way, with coaching, where that client is supposed to get to the answer on their own. But in the interest of time, breaking a big task down into bite-sized, manageable pieces is really helpful.
Yes.
Okay. So, have you ever heard of the Pomodoro method?
Yes.
Okay.
I
So,
use variations of it in various tasks.
I'm going to give a definition for people who are listening, but then I'm going to give you what I think is even better to use for your needs. So, the Pomodoro method is if you have a task that you don't want to do, then you will make yourself sit down and do it for 20, 25, 30 minutes, whatever time you set without distraction. And then you build in a reward. So, after that time period is over, then you say, once I've done 20 minutes of purging, I'm going to give myself 10 minutes to watch my favorite TV show or whatever it is to have that reward. So that's the Pomodoro method. What I like to recommend to my clients who are getting ready for a move is the reality is it is overwhelming and it's where do I begin? And so what I recommend is the 10-minute tango. And you basically, it's really important that you call a donation site or you call whoever or you schedule it in your calendar that I want to have a donation pickup. You need to give yourself at
Oh,
least a week. And it's
nope.
important
Nobody picks up in my area.
okay, well, then
Nobody.
you put it in your calendar that you're going to do a drop off so that it's in your calendar and you're going to honor your calendar. And then what you want to do is every day you're going to do 10 minutes and you're going
Mhm.
to have one bag for donation and one bag for garbage.
Mhm.
And make sure that they're different because you don't want to get them confused. And then at the
Yeah.
end of 1 week, you will have gained momentum. And then I always get people asking me, what do I do after the timer goes off? Well, if you're having fun, keep doing it. And if you're not, let it fulfill your obligation. But at least you'll start to see a momentum.
Yeah, in our area, there is a Goodwill fundraiser where if the school program fills a Goodwill trailer with donations, that the school program gets money donated. I have used that several times as like, okay, I'm collecting things together before the Goodwill stuff the fundraiser.
Hmm.
So that yes, that has been a good, so to
Great.
speak.
Yeah, well, I am concerned that we are hitting 46 minutes, but what
Yep.
I want to do, Lisa, is have you give any information to anyone who's listening or any advice, and then I will stay on with you and we will come up with a goal so that you can leave this
Okay.
session feeling really good, because I do have a lot. I'm not going to lie to you. And people with ADHD, we struggle with when we have a lot of decisions to make, we get decision fatigue. And moving is one of the biggest transitions or stresses that anyone will face, ADHD or not. So I think you make some good points, though. So, anyway, I want to wrap up the podcast in a nice little bow, and then I want to continue to give you a little bit of my service. So,
I will give you a tip that is useful and makes people laugh.
okay.
If you play Pokemon Go on your phone from your desk to your car, you will never leave your phone at work.
Oh, that's a good one.
It works.
Okay, nice. So that is your parting tip, is that anybody who's concerned about leaving their phone behind should play Pokemon Go.
Or some other walking based game.
Okay, well, I'm going to give you a tip. I always forget where I parked my car. And so what I now have to do is I have to stop and get into my body and out of my head and look around and pay attention. And you can also take a picture of where you parked, but
That's what I do.
trying to do more of getting my brain to slow down and be in my body. Any other parting advice for our listeners?
One of the things that I had to cope with was feeling broken.
Mhm.
And then at one point realized it really doesn't matter whether or not you're broken. At this point, I'm arguing that I'm not broken. But even if you're feeling broken, what matters is you are here.
Mhm.
And since you are here, you can do things with that. Now,
Mhm.
I have a quote above my desk that says, supposedly Hemingway, everyone is broken. That's how the light gets in.
Mhm. That's a great quote. I hear it, a lot of times they talk about, I think it was a Japanese pottery that gets broken and then they put
Yes.
the gold around it, and it's supposed to be more beautiful. And I definitely agree that I always grow when I break. So I am so appreciative. You're going to stick around and I'm going to
Sure.
give you some coaching. But thank you so much for your generosity in opening up your life to the people who are listening and helping me to really get the word out that we are not broken, that there is no disorder. We just are wired differently. And
Yep.
when we embrace it, we're going to live a much happier life.
And
So
my life
thank you.
is much happier. I agree.
I love it. Thank you. Thank you, Lisa.
You're
So
welcome.
with thanks for listening. If
Okay.
you liked what you heard, please share this podcast with your friends and family. Please subscribe to it and rate it. And also know that I am now going to be offering ADHD coaching. So if you are interested in learning more, you can find me on the Grandma Has ADHD podcast and or on the Silver Linings Transitions page. So there's a lot to unpack, but thank you so much for listening. Hi, everyone. I wanted to let you know that I offer ADHD coaching both on air and through private sessions virtually, as well as in person here in the San Diego area. Also, just a quick note that I edited out a portion of today's episode as it ran longer than planned and didn't add value for you as listeners. Thanks for understanding, and as always, feel free to reach out if you'd like to learn more about working together. The opinions expressed on Grandma Has ADHD podcast are those of our guests and hosts and are intended for informational and entertainment purposes only. This podcast does not provide medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The content discussed in this episode is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician, mental health professional, or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or mental health concern. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or emergency services immediately. The hosts, guests, and producers of Grandma Has ADHD do not assume any liability for the content of this podcast. Listen at your own discretion.